Welcome to A Ride on the Outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
The MMA Outsiders is back in your life. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 10. That's right, episode number 10. Zain, I can't believe it's already been 10 episodes with us.
No, I can't believe it either. You know, we started this podcast as a passion project late this summer, and getting to 10 for me was, you know, I thought it could happen. I just didn't know how quickly it would happen, and now we're here. We are at double digits of the MMA Outsiders, and after a few relatively off weeks, Tom, we have a lot to get into today. Surprisingly, considering that we're into the second week in October, and it feels like the MMA/combat sports calendar is only getting heavier.
Yeah, and honestly, if for the better, this week's still somewhat of a quiet week, although it's a quiet MMA, and then you got some boxing thrown in. It's some pretty important boxing considering the stakes in both the fights that we're going to be talking about. And then next week, Zain, we'll be discussing UFC 280, the big card over in Abu Dhabi. But before we get into anything else, make sure you hit that like button, make sure to subscribe, and ring that bell. Get all the notifications for MMA Outsiders, Empty the Bench, Beyond the Bench, Game On, Fruity Cereal, Living Life, and so much more. You can find my work at Fansided MMA. Once again, I'm Tom Albano, and that's Sam Bando. You can follow him and get his work at bjpen.com. Make sure to follow us across social media at MMA Outsiders ETB, and follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network. And you actually can see our social medias. You know, it's perfect timing as they're going across the bottom now. But we are ready to get into it. We're going to start things off. Well, we were going to start things off with some recapping. However, there are a couple of news stories that have been breaking over the past 12 to 15 hours. So we'll start with those. First one coming from the boxing world, a developing story. Frank Warren, who is a co-promoter of Tyson Fury, because Fury is co-promoted by him and Bob Arum of Top Rank. He is saying that Tyson Fury will be returning to the ring, as we expected. We talked about a few weeks ago about Fury and the potential return. He said, yeah, it's going to happen. He's not fully retired, and he will defend the WBC heavyweight title. Now, there has been a lot of speculation as to who Fury would be facing. There were rumors at one point of a Fury-Joshua matchup, and as much as we'd like to see that, we kind of had a feeling it wasn't going to happen. Now, supposedly, it will be against Derek Chisora, with a fight to take place supposedly on December 3rd at Principality Stadium in Cardiff, Wales.
Well, I want to start by asking you this question, and that is, did you ever think, let's go back to August. Did you think in August or late July, whenever that was, when Derek Chisora won his last fight, that he would be fighting Tyson Fury? Because if you were to ask me that question, I would have said absolutely not.
No. And if I'm not mistaken, Zain, he's not in the upper echelon of WBC contenders.
Right, exactly.
He's much lower on the list.
And given his last fight, which was a very, very close and hotly debated fight, that's what makes it even a little bit more surprising to me.
So would you say then maybe this is just a, keep them busy fight while giving us the potential of a, fight that could produce one of the biggest upsets if such a thing were to happen? Now, I'm saying that with like the, is it really going to happen? Because the answer is no, but
it's highly, highly doubtful. We've seen crazy things happen in heavyweight boxing before. Obviously, one of the most recent ones being Fury Reese Jr. won. Oh, there is the possibility that the crazy upset could happen here or there, but you think about it, Fury, his fan base, Wales, he has this known thing of fighting in December. which he has on several occasions, and you know for sure. And I'm not saying that this is a guarantee by any stretch, but knowing the way Frank Warren and Bob Arum do business, or knowing what we know about them as promoters, they want to make sure that Tyson Fury has his send off that he's been looking for. And all Tyson Fury has wanted to do was give somebody that was rightfully deserving of that shot. And although Chisora really is the last guy on that list, you have to give Fury credit that he did keep his word. He's done everything he's supposed to do, and he didn't shy away from saying, "Hey, I will not fight Anthony Joshua as he agrees to my terms." And this is where we're at. We're getting the Chisora fight, and it's going to happen.
Yeah, and then you say bottom of the list, and I had to look to just double check. He's number 14, Chisora. Imagine if in the UFC Dana booked Kamaru Usman against the number 14 welterweight contender. That would be
people would be outraged. What I more meant to say in regards to bottom of the list, not as much rankings wise, but I meant in terms of who Fury wanted to fight. I think Chisora would have been.
Yeah, he was like option number 3, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that was a point there. But for him to be number 14 is unsurprising to say the least. So yeah. But as we know, and as the UFC tries to allude to, boxing is going to do what it's going to do. Obviously, they missed out on a huge opportunity to make much more money than they will for this fight. And it's one of those things where I think it is what it is. The fight's going to happen. The promoters win. Do the fans win? I don't really think so. Because knowing how I think this fight is going to go, Fury should be able to defend his title with ease and then potentially do whatever he wants after that. I think that this is just so Fury can get a fight, but we'll see how this plays out.
And going off of what you were talking about, how it's not surprising that they cost themselves money. I mean, it goes to what I said last week. That will potentially be a running gag on this show. And so, once again, boxing gets in its own way.
And that's exactly what happened here.
So,
but yeah, early prediction for this fight, I like Fury by decision.
Fury by decision, really? Now,
yeah,
have these two faced off before?
I'm not positive. Can you recall if these two have fought?
They've fought twice, apparently.
Oh, really? Okay.
And if that's the case, then I don't expect anything different from Fury winning again. It's one of those things where it's like, why would I expect Derek Chisora, who's already lost to Fury twice and is coming off of a questionable decision and is challenging for the heavyweight championship as a number 14 contender, why would I expect Fury to lose to him?
Which, full disclosure, I thought Chisora lost his last fight, and I watched the entire fight. I didn't think he won.
So, with that being the case, I actually think Fury could get a late stoppage.
That's fair. I do know this much. I think the over 8.5 rounds could be in play for that fight.
What's the funny thing? I was thinking round 8, round 9, and the bet is the over/under is round 8.5. It's like right in the middle of the 2 rounds I was thinking of.
That's crazy. But hey, that was the first thought that came to my head, and that's a prop that could either win you the bet or lose you the bet. So,
I'm glad I don't have to bet on that fight right now.
That's very, very true. I just wonder what's going to happen for the rest of the card. Is if they don't stack the card with other fights. Tom, I don't know about you. I just don't know if you can sell this fight by itself. And in fact, I don't even think you can.
And then think about it. This is a stadium show. They won it at Principality Stadium in Cardiff.
No, I get it. I'm just saying, when you're thinking of the casual boxing fan who only tunes into a couple fights a year, are they going to be really, revved up for Fury Chisora? I don't think so.
I think it depends on if said fight fan is going to be fine with purchasing a fight just for Fury alone. But if they want a competitive heavyweight championship match, I don't know if this is where they're going to turn to. If the undercard isn't, good, I don't know if they turn to this.
Well, let me ask you this question. On that same day, although it's more than likely not going to conflict with one another, is the Kevin Holland Wonderboy Thompson UFC Fight Night card. If you were given a choice to watch Fury Chisora or Holland Wonderboy, what would you choose?
Holland Wonderboy, probably.
Yeah, I would too. But then again, though.
But again, that's not a knock on Fury. That's a knock on the circumstances surrounding the fight.
Yeah, and actually December 3rd is going to rev up to be a big sports weekend because you have several college football conference championship games, and that same night is the Big Ten championship game on Fox. So that's perfect because depending on when the fight is, you could probably watch the fight earlier in the day and then watch all the other things that you wanted to see later on in the day without even missing anything. So for sports fans as a whole, it could work out really nicely. So,
yeah, and I mean, it goes to what we were talking about last week. We were talking about the PFL on ESPN Plus pay-per-view the day after Thanksgiving. In this case, you could say similar circumstance considering all the college football championship stuff that's going to happen. But like you said, hopefully for the sake of those sports fans, the card is placed, or at least if they're looking for the one fight is placed around a time where there's not going to be too much conflict, especially for those UFC fans who are going to be very interested in Holland versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, like you and I are going to be.
Yes, assuming, of course, that fight stays on. It's obviously over 2.5 months away. But, yeah, I think December 3rd, based on where we're at right now, is shaping up to be a really big sports weekend, and it'll culminate with the heavyweight championship, and you can't really ask for much more than that. So, nonetheless, I'm glad that at least Fury got a fight, and we'll see how that progresses.
Other piece of developing news, Alexander Volkanovski, the UFC featherweight champion. Now, he hinted in the lead up to and after that trilogy win over Max Holloway this past summer that he was looking to potentially move up to lightweight and be champ. And we might have a first step at that. So UFC 280, obviously, again, takes place next week in Abu Dhabi, main evented by Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev for the vacant UFC lightweight championship. Oliveira was the UFC lightweight champion and technically should still be it, but he ended up missing weight and as a result lost the championship on the scales back in May. These two, Charles and Islam, will fight for the championship at UFC 280, and Alexander Volkanovski will be the backup fighter. In other words, for those of you unfamiliar with the term, he is going to weigh in for the card, even though he does not have a place on the card. If Charles Oliveira or Islam Makhachev miss weight, or if they get injured in these next 10-ish days in the lead up to the event, Volkanovski will step in as a replacement opponent.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You nailed it right on the head. And honestly, when I saw this news, I got goosebumps because I've been very impressed over the last several years now with the UFC's lighter weight divisions, and now you could potentially have two of the pound-for-pound best fighters in the sport today potentially have a chance to fight each other before we even thought it could potentially happen. This is assuming that Islam doesn't show up to the fight, which I think he will. I would argue that that's who the card was based around. But this is a great consolation prize if we get it. And I think if this fight will eventually happen, I think it's just a matter of when, meaning Volk versus Oliveira. But what I will say is it's a genius move by the UFC, considering that they're two of the best male fighters in the sport, and they're arguably the two best fighters pound for pound right now in any division. So it makes the storyline of this Oliveira-Makhachev fight interesting because now you have the potential Volkanovski angle if somebody gets hurt. But it's an interesting development, very close to the fight. We're obviously a little over a week out or so. And it'll be interesting to see it progresses over that amount of time, and I think it's a great move because Volkanovski is a very exciting fighter, and he's dominated the featherweight division for the better part of several years now. So, and it'll be interesting, and I really like the move by the UFC, and I'm very much looking forward to next week where we will be able to dissect what is the highly anticipated lightweight title fight between Oliveira and Islam Makhachev.
I agree. It is a genius move. I think it's a great scenario for Volkanovski. It's win-win because, yeah, you're weighing in for just show money, but again, all you have to do is make weight and you get the show money. And then it actually was announced earlier this week, Zan, that UFC 284, which I believe that's the number, I believe that's going to be the February 2023 card, is being targeted.
Which would make sense given the number order we have right now, is what I was saying.
Correct. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that's being targeted for Australia, which means that would be a perfect place for Volkanovski to headline. So you're not doing anything for another. Yeah, granted, you're going to be doing training camp and stuff, but you're not going to have a fight for 4 more months. You might as well take this opportunity to be a backup fighter, right, to make it known, to make the statement that you are on these two guys' tails. Whoever wins this fight, you're sending a little warning message. Hey, I'm here and I'm looking up to you guys.
Yeah. I mean, Tom, imagine if that 284 card goes off in Australia based on the demand that's been captivated by the fans ever since COVID, because Australia has been one of the stricter countries to have COVID in protocol. So to hear that the UFC is targeting February of 2023, that could make for a massive card that could potentially see Volk on that card, and Israel Adesanya if he can get by Alex Pereira as well in November. So I think the beginning of 2023 is looking very good for the UFC based on what they have potentially lined up. So
and I think the Volkanovski situation at UFC 284 would be interesting depending on what happens here, because if Oliveira gets by Makhachev, I could very well see the potential of Volk versus Oliveira at that February Australia card.
That would be absolutely absurd and literally one of the biggest fights in UFC history, period. Bar none, if that were to happen.
Now, if Makhachev wins, then potentially, yeah, Oliveira lost the title on the scales, but it would be his first loss in however long. That maybe, depending on how the fight goes, you have to consider a rematch, and then maybe at 284 you just have Volk defend the featherweight title one more time if there's a featherweight standout that you think deserves that title shot.
I could easily see that scenario as well.
Maybe Yair.
Yeah, that's true. But given the way Yair's last fight went and is how unfortunate it was, I don't know.
I know, but I think we kind of, I don't know if it was this division that we talked about previously, but it's like there's Holloway, who's already beaten 3 times. Yair would be next up. Ortega got hurt against Yair. Emmett, Cater, and Allen, I don't think are there yet. This is why we're having the discussion, partially why we're having the discussion about him moving up to a champions, because the featherweight scene right now is not that it's bad, because that's a talented division, but no one
talented division. But as you were about to say, no one really stands out as
right. And I think the problem is, I think I was going with this, that I'm going to make that same comparison. Holloway being to what we would call in baseball the quadruple A player, that he is better than everybody else on that rankings except for Volkanovski, which puts a very weird situation, because if Max can beat the rest of them, can any of them really beat Volk? The answer by MMA math would be no.
True, and it's hilarious that you use the term MMA math, considering most of the time we make fun of it and we say that it doesn't make sense. But here in this scenario, somehow, some way, magically, it makes sense. Yeah. But all kidding aside, genius move by the UFC. I'm really curious to see that happens at UFC 280, if anything, with that scenario. And if we get a last minute Oliveira Volkanovski or Makhachev Volkanovski, buckle your seatbelt, because it might be a really bumpy ride. You never know.
You never know. All right, so we're gonna do something a little weird here, Zan. We're gonna talk about a kickboxing fight. The reason why we're talking about a kickboxing fight is it involves an MMA legend and kickboxing legend, to be fair, because Alistair Overeem competed in K1 in addition to the Pride Fighting Championship before moving over to Strikeforce in the UFC. And Alistair Overeem returned to kickboxing, took on Badr Hari at Glory Collision 4 last weekend. He was damaged quite a bit early on. I think did he suffer a knockout, or did he knock down Badr Hari later on in the fight?
No, I'm pretty sure he knocked him down later on in the fight, but don't quote me, because
but he got damaged pretty early on.
No. First, I'm just saying that I only saw highlights of this fight, considering what time the fight was.
Yeah,
same. I didn't watch the entire fight, but I saw that much to know that he was rocked early. Yeah.
But Alistair Overeem, his first match back in kickboxing, and it's a success. So, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, Alistair Overeem is a legend. At this point, he can do whatever the hell he wants. Let me say this, though. It's pretty badass that in 2022, Alistair Overeem at 40 plus years old can still do what he does at a high level. And I don't know if you saw, but there was this photo comparison today of him weighing in for his last UFC fight to the Alistair Overeem that we saw this past weekend. He looks like he's in the best shape I've ever seen him, period. And I really do think that has something to do with it. And it's cool that Overeem and Hari had their trilogy and had their moment in the sun, because they've been legends in that sport for years.
And Zen, consider this. That was also his first kickboxing fight in about 12 years.
Which is insane to think about, considering how long his MMA career spanned. It spanned over 2 decades, which makes him in his own right a living legend. What's crazy is he pretty much won every single belt that you could possibly win, except for the UFC heavyweight title, which to this day is one of the biggest what ifs, in my opinion, in the history of heavyweight MMA. That's a discussion for another day. But I just always think, when I see that figure, that the only major belt that he didn't win was the UFC title, to me is mind-boggling.
Absolutely. So, and he still could have, like you said, it's a could have scenario for him. He could have done it. I mean, think about this. In 2020, he was still winning fights. I know Walt Harris and Augusto Sagai aren't the highest ranked heavyweights, but he was still winning fights. He was still proving that he could still go. And I think this weekend still proves that he can still go even at his age.
Oh, for sure. And, it looked like 2 years ago that maybe if he strung together a couple more in a row, that there could be this miracle scenario that he would have gotten a title shot.
Zan, I think if he had beaten Volkov in that last UFC fight, that was a significant chance he could have gotten a title shot.
And what makes that fight even crazier is how experienced Volkov is too, which makes that fact in itself just nuts. Nonetheless, though, Alistair Overeem, MMA legend, MMA pioneer of the sport. You gotta give him credit that he still has it, whether you like it or not. He can still compete, and he loves to do what he's like. He's like Anderson Silva. They still do it because they love what they do, and you can't blame them for that.
No, sir, not at all. Now, as far as Badr Hari goes, this one might be tough. Because
how many has he lost in a row now?
He has gone winless. So he lost at the original Glory Collision to Rico Verhoeven. That was when he suffered the arm injury. He broke his arm on the punch.
I do remember that.
Then he fought. I actually have it all listed here because I used to be very heavy into Glory. defeated Hesdy Gurgis, but then that fight went to a no contest because he and Gurgis both tested positive for PEDs. Then he lost to Verhoeven again at Glory Collision 2 with a leg injury.
That one was gruesome. If you remember it.
That was a very gruesome deja vu. Gruesome deja vu.
Mm-hmm.
Lost to Benjamin Adebui. Lost to Arkadiusz Wierzek. Both of those were stoppages. In fact, the latter was a head kick knockout. Then he and Wierzek, I guess because the fight results were so shocking, had the rematch at Glory 80, but that was the fight, if you remember, Zan, that got interrupted because of the rowdy crowd in the Netherlands.
That was insanity. I do remember that. Twitter was losing its minds over it.
Because the biggest comparison I can make to that, Zan, at least in recent memory, was UFC Mexico when they were throwing the bottles in the co-main event results.
I do remember that.
And what happened in Mexico City paled in comparison to what happened in the Netherlands on that fight.
For sure. But yeah, nonetheless, I really do think it's time for him to hang him up. What do you
I think you were going with where I was going with. I thought I was going to get backlash. Maybe I'll get backlash on the Twitterverse, but yeah, I think he's gone winless in 7 years. I think it's time.
Yeah, but hey, nonetheless, credit to Overeem. Did what he needed to do. Got the comeback UD. There's nothing more you can say. He's a living legend of the sport and one of the most famous athletes to ever come out of the Netherlands for sure, without a doubt.
For sure. Now, Zan, we move on from one legend to another legend and one who is hanging up his gloves in MMA. So Frankie Edgar, the former UFC lightweight champion, who also has had success at the featherweight levels and even to a degree at bantamweight, is going to be calling it a career at UFC 281, which take place in about a month at Madison Square Garden. He's taking on Cruz Gutierrez on the card, and following that fight, he will lay his gloves down in the middle of the octagon.
Yeah. So as you know, I'm a little bit of an older MMA fan, so I can.
You and I both.
But this is how old I am. I vividly remember watching his UFC debut against Tyson Griffin. This was back in the day when you bought the pay-per-views, you had to stay up to watch the unaired prelims that they wouldn't show until the main event was over. And thankfully, that happened to be one of them. And I became a Frankie Edgar fan ever since. Just to talk about some of my favorite moments from his career, UFC 136 against Gray Maynard. The epic trilogy fight was insane. The second Gray Maynard fight was the stuff of legends. His dominant win against BJ Penn in the rematch was crazy. His fight against Uriah Faber was extremely memorable. I mean, every single big name that guy that you could think, oh, who's the guy that Frankie Edgar's fought? He's literally fought every single big name, at least at lightweight that you could possibly think of, maybe minus Conor McGregor, but otherwise he's fought pretty much everyone, and he's held his own for several years. You never watch a Frankie Edgar fight except for fairly recently, I would say, and say, "Oh yeah, Frankie Edgar got absolutely dominated." You rarely ever say that,
right? I mean, and he was successful at 2 weight classes. He earned title shots at 2 weight classes. Not everybody does that. And in 1 weight division, he did become the champion, upsetting BJ Penn in the infamous Abu Dhabi card UFC 112 in 2010.
Yeah, yes, it certainly was, and it's a decision that's still debated to this day as to if he actually won the fight or not.
Correct.
And then he also had his 2 controversial fights with Ben Henderson. Both fights, I thought that he won. In fact.
Yeah. I mean, he's a competitive fighter. You know, bad circumstances surrounding those decisions, but he was still a champ, still a hell of a competitor, a tough, gritty fighter who could screw you up on the feet, was great on the ground. And today, think about it, Zan. After that first bantamweight fight that he had a year or so ago with Pedro Munoz, so a couple of years ago, it was a split decision. But then he fought Corey Sandhagen. That's when the infamous knee came. But I mean, if that Corey Sandhagen fight, actually, like we talked about with Overeem, about if that Volkov fight plays different, if that fight with Sandhagen plays out differently for Edgar, potentially he might have gotten a contenders fight or a title shot at bantamweight as well.
Yeah, that is a what if, but briefly moving over to his opponent, this is easily the biggest fight of his career, and if he can win this fight, his stock skyrockets, in my opinion, just given the name. If he beats Edgar, especially in New York, Edgar by way of Toms River, New Jersey, pretty much in Edgar's backyard, this would be a massive win for Gutierrez.
Do you think, Zan, this is now? I'm not saying the UFC doesn't put Edgar in high regard anymore, but I'm saying, is this, the usual thing that we see in MMA when it comes to retirements, where the UFC is going to put a young, hungry fighter in front of them to try and, old yeller them out of the promotion to give some hype to the younger fighter?
Yeah, I mean, this always happens. I mean, we can think of countless examples where guys have gone out and they fought younger, hungrier fighters. I think it's just a part of the business. I really, at least as far as I'm concerned, it's not going to change as long as Dana's president. They like to build young prospects up like that, and this is another example of that. But I will say this: I do think, though, that Frankie Edgar has a great chance to win this fight and go out on a high note.
That was going to be my next question. Who early prediction of this fight, and I lean to Gutierrez. I lean to Edgar actually seeing the final bell, but I could see Edgar. But I see Gutierrez. I mean, getting his hand raised. Although this is definitely a fight that Edgar can win. You're right on that. But for some reason, I see Gutierrez getting it.
Yeah, for sure. Nonetheless, though, great career. Definitely a UFC Hall of Famer.
One of the best. And I think, Sam, we were talking about a week or so ago about fighters. Actually, we were talking about Aldo, about fighters who helped to innovate and really make those lighter weight categories stand out. And I think you got to include Edgar as part of that crew.
Yeah, I think you do. And this might sound controversial, but I think Frankie Edgar is one of the best MMA fighters of all time at dictating the fight with his wrestling. You can only name me a few fighters off the top of your head who are good at dictating a fight with the takedown, and I think Frankie Edgar is one of those few that did it to mastery and perfection. So
I like it.
Yeah,
I like the thought.
Yeah, I think he's a good example, and so is George St. Pierre. You could even say that the early days of Tito Ortiz, him setting up the takedown and using his ground and pound to stifle opponents. There are very few fighters, in my opinion, that really integrated wrestling into MMA as well as those three that I just named did. So,
all right. So from the past, we look forward to the future. We're going to talk about a couple of futures in the UFC. The first of which, actually, we're going to talk about the same card too. So 1 month later, UFC 282, December 10th in Vegas. Paddy Pimblett's looking for a fight. That's not the name of a new series. That is Paddy Pimblett is looking for a fight.
Yes. For those of you who are confused by a reference, there's a show on YouTube called Dana White Looking for a Fight, where he goes around with Dean Thomas and Matt Serra and scouts talent. This is not what we're talking about here. Paddy Pimblett is actually looking for a fight, and he's potentially looking for a fight at UFC 282 to close out the year. And one name that is surprisingly on the radar of Mr. Pimblett is Trey Ogden, who, when I first saw that, I was a little bit taken aback just because we haven't heard Ogden's name in quite a bit, and their banter on social media has been relatively interesting. So, by the way, just as a reminder, we did talk about Pimblett like a month or so ago, and we had predicted that he would end up on another card as Molly McCann, and it looks like that's no longer going to happen because obviously, as it's been well documented, Pimblett does not want to fight in New York City, so it looks like they're going to be putting him in Vegas.
Yeah, so it'll be 1 month pay-per-view card where we'll have Molly, and then the other month we're gonna have Paddy. And yeah, Trey Ogden he has previously called out Paddy Pimblett, and in fact, in the comments section of a post from September, in which there's a video shot by Amy Kaplan, who is my editor at Fansided MMA. San, your former editor when you were here at Fansided. It was a post-fight interview with Trey Ogden, and Trey made mention of wanting to fight Paddy Pimblett. And for some reason, very recently, Paddy started to comment, and he just let loose in the comments, and he and Ogden started going at it again. So, Trey Ogden wouldn't be the first name that came to mind when it comes to what the UFC's plans were for an opponent. I thought maybe they'd, try to step it up a little more since it's a pay-per-view card, but this is the magic that fight hype brings. And as we say, Zan, sometimes these things happen in MMA.
Yeah, that's very true. Sometimes these things do happen in MMA. And if this fight does happen, full disclosure, this trash talk, if it's not the entire embedded series that week, I'm going to be very, 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 very disappointed. So if this fight happens, fair warning, this embedded series better be absolutely lit. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Moving on from him to somebody who's still making their UFC debut, Bo Nickal. So did we not say not to panic after he didn't get the contract the first time?
Yes, we said, and we made it very clear that nobody should panic. And sure enough, you and I once again were both correct.
Because guess what? He's got his contract, and now he's got his first fight. He's fighting Jamie Pickett at UFC 282. And Jamie Pickett is a talent that I have spoken to. Another previous Dana White Contender Series alum. I've spoken to him. He's a great guy, pretty funny. But I don't know if he's going to be any sort of match for Bo. And I think maybe this might be, but considering how Pickett is a Contender Series alum, he does have a few wins under his belt in the UFC. It does feel like they could have started Bo, at a much lower pace. But the fact that they're giving him somebody like Pickett, this is a fight that Bo can very well win, and he's probably going to be a heavy favorite. I'm just saying, they could have put him lower on the scale, but considering they give him Pickett, the UFC has some pretty high hopes.
Yeah. I have to ask you this. James Lynch, when he put out the announcement a week ago that this fight was going to occur, he kind of hinted that, if Pickett loses, there's a chance that, the UFC could be looking at other options. Could you see Pickett getting cut if he loses this fight?
I didn't want to say it because, like I said, I do like Pickett, but I do kind of agree with you that this might be a setup of, this might be a setup of rising Bo Nickal stock and moving on from Pickett. We've talked about it. We talked about it a week or so ago with the UFC's current structure. Just send anybody out who's on an expiring contract and bring in a whole bunch of new crop of talents from a Contender Series. Yeah,
I would say Bo Nickal finishes him within the first 8 minutes. That's my prediction.
I could very well see that. I honestly could very well see that.
And I think he submits him very quickly. That's what I think.
All right. But now let's talk about the other angle to this, and how should the UFC go about pushing him? So when I say push, combat sports, primarily professional wrestling term for trying to elevate somebody's status into making them a star. Because again, I think I've talked about this before about trying to push talents too quickly, slow builds versus quick build. What is the strategy you see the UFC doing with Bo Nickal?
Well, I can say this. This is genius matchmaking for one. So first off, they got the fight right. Second off, they got the venue right. They're putting him back in Vegas, although this time he's not Mr. Apex. He's going to the T-Mobile Arenas. So now you're going to have more eyes on him. More than likely, he's going to be on the ABC portion of the card, which means a lot of people are going to see his fight, or he could potentially open the main card, depending on the order that they decide. So I think Jamie Pickett for a first fight in the UFC is solid. And then from there, based on if he wins, they're just going to keep giving him more and more and more of these contenders that are maybe on losing streaks. And then maybe by about his fourth or fifth UFC fight, depending on if he wins his first three or so, maybe you'll start to see him fight the upper echelon, the top 15, the top 10 of that division, and be a force by about 2024. That would be, I think you could see Bo Nickal challenge for a title as early as the summer of 2024. That's what I think.
You have some pretty high expectations that you see within that you say already he's going to be a future title challenger, and that's a little less than 2 years away, which honestly isn't. It's a long time, but it's not a long time. Especially,
I just think the UFC, in my personal opinion, they realize that they have struck gold. First off, he's super marketable. He's charismatic on the mic. He doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks of him. He has this swagger that reminds me of Conor of McGregor, but
he has what they want.
Right, but what I'm saying is he is the American version of McGregor that the UFC is looking for, and now they have him. So they have to do in my opinion, if I'm the UFC, they have to do everything they can to slow build him, get him on a massive winning streak, and who the hell knows? But if he wins 5 or 6 in a row, 2024 is going to be a potential changing of the guard year in mixed martial arts if he keeps doing what he's doing right now. If any of his first 2 UFC fights, quote unquote, they were in the Contender Series, they didn't really count as official UFC fights. If any of his first 2, I guess, UFC ready fights, if you want to call them that, go anything like the way that they did, we're in for some nasty finishes where every single time he fights, he's going to be must-see TV. So I'm super high on Bo Nickal. No disrespect to Jamie Pickett, but this is a horrible matchup for him, and I really don't think it's going to go well.
Well, Zain, I'll end this with one step further. So we talked about in the show how maybe the UFC needs Conor more than they need the UFC. Do you think, considering, like you said, that Bo Nickal, you said maybe that he can be the American version of Conor McGregor? Well, do you think he can rise to the level that McGregor is at, if that's even possible?
Only time will tell. I don't know if anybody can get to the level McGregor got to, but given his connection to the Big Ten and Penn State and kind of that blue-collar work ethic, I think he could sit well with a lot of people, especially people who aren't fight fans who are being introduced to the sport for the very first time based on where he came from. So that's another aspect. And as a Big Ten alumnus myself, I'm pretty excited to see that we have a Big Ten participant competing at the highest level of MMA. So selfishly enough, I'm pretty excited to see how his UFC career turns out too. Hopefully he doesn't flame out. Hopefully this isn't a situation where, it's Sage Northcutt where they pushed him way too quickly and eventually he was out of the sport. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. I
was gonna say Northcutt hasn't fought since getting knocked out in one championship.
No, he is no, he is not. But yeah, he. I don't know. I was going to say, hopefully it's not a situation where he becomes a Sage Northcutt or even a TJ Grant. For example, that's a name you probably haven't heard in the.
Yeah, TJ. I remember TJ Grant was supposed to be one of the big things that one of the big, another one of these big lightweight fighters who could help elevate the lighter division. But
yeah, I mean, after he didn't get that title shot, his career was basically over. So
yeah, exactly.
And I guess another comparison you can make too is hopefully he doesn't end up like Matt Lindland either. So
Matt Lindland. Again, like you said, name that you never hear in ages, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember White. I remember.
I'm spitballing, aren't I? What I'm saying is I hope he doesn't end up like any of those guys I just mentioned. So yeah, or even I can go one step further and say Shane Carwin too. What could have been?
Shane Carwin. He headlined the first UFC pay-per-view I ever watched.
See, that's a cool fun fact in a party. Like what pay-per-view was that? Lesnar versus Carwin?
In the very one.
Really?
Yeah.
Really, that is the.
I was following UFC for longer to like I started getting into it in the early tough seasons, but I never purchased the pay-per-view till that one.
Hey, I'm lucky enough to say that I purchased that one as well. That was like a slew of 5 or 6 in a row that I purchased back then, and yeah, I have no regrets. Anyway, we like on behalf of both of us, in all seriousness, we would really like to see Bo Nickal be successful, and for Jamie Pickett's sake, I really do hope he puts on a competitive fight, because I think he has the tools to do so. So
for sure. All right, Zain, we got some boxing we got to take care of. Little boxing previews. First of all, Devin Haney, George Kambosos 2, undisputed lightweight championship on the line. Devin Haney and George Kambosos first fought in June, with Haney retaining via unanimous decision. There was a rematch clause in the contract, and GK decided to exercise it immediately. So these two are going to be heading to Australia. They were first at Marvel Stadium. Now they're going to the Rod Laver Arena. Is Haney going to get the job done again, or is GK going to find a way this time?
Yeah, I like Haney in this fight. Trains out of Las Vegas. It's a boxing mecca. He's just overall a great fighter. I just like the way he paces himself, uses a ton of energy, but knows how to maintain his stamina at the same time. Was really good with frustrating Kambosos. If you remember in the first fight, I think in round 5, 6, and 7, he got Kambosos up against the ropes on several occasions, nearly finished the fight late. It ended up going to a decision. It was very close, to the delight of the Marvel Stadium crowd. And I really do think that if Kambosos fights the same way again, he needs to be careful, because, as I said, Haney's power is something to be aware of. And I think Kambosos, what he's going to have to do differently is he's going to have to be the fresher fighter, and he's going to have to go the second the bell rings. And it's going to be interesting to see how the fight plays out, because the first fight was super back and forth. Haney did take care of business, won a decision, and I think he has a good chance to do it again. I either have it as a round 9 TKO for Devin Haney for him to defend the lightweight championship, or I think Haney wins a decision for Kambosos to win. He needs to get Haney out of there early, probably in the first 4 rounds. So that's how I see the fight going. I don't see this going to a trilogy. I do think Haney ends the series.
No, and I agree. I get what you're saying about him trying to bring the fight to Haney right away. Haney is not the kind of fighter that's going to go down quickly in 2 or 3 rounds, especially not against somebody like a George Kambosos.
And I agree with you. That's why I think it's so highly unlikely that scenario even takes place. That's why I'm saying the only way Kambosos is going to be able to win this fight is if he makes it his fight. And as you alluded to just a second ago, Haney's not the kind of guy for you to come to him. He comes to you first. So,
and that's not to discredit GK, because Teofimo Lopez, when he when he and GK fought in November, about almost a year ago, with 3 of the 4 big lightweight titles on the line. It was a very close and controversial decision, but ultimately he ended up getting the job done. And on my scorecards, I did score the fight for Kambosos. Now, granted, this first fight between Haney and Kambosos, I had for Haney. I think they got it right. Haney was the undisputed champion. He is the face of the lightweight division in boxing, and it seems like boxing. It's very rare that we see an undisputed champ, let alone the fact that all 4 boxing bodies are pushing somebody. It seems like they are all open to the fact that Haney is the present and potentially, hopefully, for a while, the future of this lightweight division. So I think Kambosos is going to make it a close fight. I hope it's going to be a fun fight, but I think Haney's still going to take it.
Yeah, I think Haney's still going to take it too. And, if this fight is electric and we get a trilogy, I think it could go down as one of the biggest trilogies in recent lightweight boxing history. But of course, that's wishful thinking. We have to get through the rematch first. So nonetheless, I do think Haney gets the job done, retains his title, gets out of Australia unscathed, and goes home the champ once again.
We also have Claressa Shields versus Savannah Marshall for the undisputed women's middleweight championship. This fight was actually supposed to take place a month ago. However, it needed to be delayed as a result of the death of Queen Elizabeth over in England. So now these two will do battle for the women's middleweight championship. And Savannah Marshall, tough. Could we say the toughest fight Shields has? But I don't know if that's necessarily saying anything when you compare Shields to basically everybody she stepped in the ring with. Everybody Shields has stepped in the ring with, she's blown away.
Yeah, I don't see this fight going any differently. No offense to Savannah Marshall, but this is, and I'm being 100% transparent, this is the first real time that I've actually heard her be in a really big fight like this, and I just don't know if she's going to be ready for it.
No. I think potentially we're going to have to eventually put Claressa Shields, I know they were trying to, move her along with a fairly quick pace. Shields was ranking up championships at multiple divisions in women's boxing. And ultimately, I think there's going to have to come a point where we need Shields to take on a really big noted name in women's boxing at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, by the way, just so you know, in case you didn't know, the fight is taking place at the O2 Arena in London.
Really strong location. That's a good place for Shields to continue her reach. And actually, O2 Arena, I don't know about the same arena, but London, isn't that where Shields won one of her gold medals? 2012.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, full circle moment if she can get another undisputed championship in a place where she was a gold medalist.
And these two both competed in the Olympics against one another, and there's some bad blood. So
fun. Again, fun, but and Savannah Marshall is tough, but ultimately Shields is just Claressa Shields.
Yeah, actually, I want to make a slight correction. They actually did compete when they were both amateurs coming up the ranks. They may have competed in the same Olympics. They just didn't compete against one another.
Regardless, there's bad blood.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I do think Claressa Shields wins this fight. I think she does it within the first 4 rounds.
I think this one goes to a decision.
Interesting.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't think Shields gets finishes quite often. So
as far as I recall, she does not either. So
she has 2 fights. 2 of her first 4 fights ended in a finish. The rest are decisions. So I'm gonna lean towards decision.
That's fair. But it's sometimes better to be slightly different than you. So I'd love to see Shields get a finish.
I agree. I agree that it's slightly different, and I would like to see Shields get a finish, but ultimately, I'm going to stick with the huge. All
That's
right.
fair.
Before we get into UFC Vegas 62, just want to take a second to give a shout out to Pride Never Die. Happy 25th anniversary to the Pride Fighting Championships. Pride FC held its very first event, Pride 1, in 1997. Then, on this very day, October 11th.
Yeah, imagine what would have happened had this event not gone well. I think the history of MMA would be very different. Oh, thank goodness for Pride because it introduced us to a different era of just absolute legends. You can go down the list: Shogun, Nogueira, Sakuraba, Wander E. Silva, Dan Henderson. You just keep going for hours on end. All of these fighters that eventually made it to the UFC, minus Fedor, unfortunately. All of these fighters that made it to the UFC made MMA, or that golden era of MMA, what it was. We got to see some of the biggest fights in the history of the sport at the time take place after Pride dissolved into the UFC. So yes, happy 25th anniversary to the to the best MMA organization with a ring of all time.
uh yeah, I really feel like, I wish Pride was still around. It breaks my heart that it met its fate in the mid 2000s the way that it did. Certainly, if it's not for the fact, if the UFC doesn't elevate its game when Pride was the number one MMA promotion in the world, you know who's to say what the state of MMA is today? I think
Yeah,
Pride.
yeah, definitely MMA would not be on as big of a mainstream scale as it is today. It would be a much smaller it would be a much smaller venture. And in fact, we might even not have we might not even have this podcast
Probably not.
if it wasn't for the growth and evolution of the UFC, which included the dissolvement of Pride, unfortunately. But yes, I didn't start watching Pride until after it dissolved, so I didn't
Same.
catch up on it until after it was no longer a thing. But going back and watching some of those old fights, especially with Final Countdown and Final Conflict, those New Year's shows were absolutely absurd, and just the production was ahead of its time. Everything about it makes you feel like you're in today's technological sphere of combat sports, except it was about 10 or 15 years ago, which makes it even cooler. The unfortunate thing, the biggest fight that never happened, in my personal opinion, that could have taken place over in Pride or when the dissolvement happened, was Randy Couture versus Fedor Emelianenko. To this day, it devastates me that fight never took place in the cage or in the ring to determine who the baddest heavyweight in the world was, at least of the year 2008. So,
Yeah, I mean, you could create it in EA Sports MMA, but you can't. We weren't able to get it in Pride or the UFC or anywhere else for that matter. Uh,
unfortunately, even Affliction for that matter.
even Affliction, right? Um, what is Zen? I'm with you in that I wasn't able to get really introduced to Pride and watch its stuff until after its dissolution. I do remember seeing the trailers, being younger and seeing the pay-per-view trailers. I remember seeing pay-per-view trailers for like Pride Final Countdown, Pride Final Conflict, Pride Total Elimination on DirecTV. But I never really would watch it. But I mean, Pride was just so different, man. The rule set I think was better. I liked Pride's rule set much better than the 10-point must system. I like their scoring system so much better. I think
Oh
they have
yeah,
better rule set, a more fun rule set.
for sure, and they graded the fights holistically, which I appreciated.
Absolutely, which I think modern MMA scoring systems kind of need. One championship does it, but the UFC doesn't. Uh, I love the whole presentation. I love the ceremony at the start where they would introduce all the fighters. match by match.
Lenny Hart with her famous introductions.
Crazy Pride lady, yes.
That's exactly right. And Tom, no disrespect to Face the Pain at all, but Pride's intro music to this day has to give you goosebumps. Does it not?
Oh yes. And it was made more I may mention the opening ceremony, but it was always made more intense when you had I don't know the exact term, but there was somebody banging on the drum during the intro. It was like really, really firing you up, and then combined with Lenny Hart.
It made you feel like you were watching an Olympics opening ceremonies every single time.
I think it's better than the Olympics opening ceremony.
No, I agree. No, I agree. And what made it even crazier was when the UFC thought, "Oh, Pride wants to compete with us. Let's send Chuck Liddell over there." But what's crazy is, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but when the UFC was turning 25 themselves, they did a UFC 25 years in short documentary on the whole Pride saga. And it's funny watching Dana's reaction when they show him the bracket again. And he was like, at the time, we knew that we were getting Wanderlei Silva. And it didn't happen.
Quentin Rampage Jackson says hello.
That's true. And the legend of Rampage Jackson was born. We wouldn't have had Rampage versus Dan Henderson for the unification of the titles if it wasn't for that tournament to begin with.
Favorite Pride moment. I'll go first. Fry versus Takayama. Okay, they're gonna start slow and it just start wailing on it.
That's a classic fight. My favorite Pride moment was when Kevin Randleman picked Fedor Emelianenko up.
Oh, the slam.
Slammed him on his head and still lost. To this day, it's the craziest 2.5 minute sequence I've ever seen.
And wasn't that, I'm trying to think, didn't in that same tournament Kevin Randleman pull off a major upset like the round before too?
He sure did. I'm pretty sure that he knocked out Mirko Cro Cop.
That was the Cro Cop fight, yeah. He went from Cro Cop to Fedor, knocked one of them out, and even though he didn't win, he slammed the other. Kevin Randleman really was a fucking beast.
Just imagine if Mirko Cro Cop won the heavyweight tournament. You would have had, instead of Mirko Cro Cop fighting Gabriel Gonzaga, you would have had Mirko Cro Cop getting an instant title shot against Randy Couture at UFC 74 instead of Gabriel Gonzaga. I mean, imagine that. You would have had that instead.
I feel like this week I need to sit down and watch a Pride card just because it's Pride's 25th birthday.
You should. I would.
We should do that on a normal week. We turn on Fight Pass and watch Pride. If you've never seen a Pride card before, you're missing out.
You absolutely have to. And even the best of Pride is a nice substitute too. So
that's true. If you really want a taste of everything Pride had to offer at one point, there is that.
100%. And again, happy 25th anniversary to the best number 2, arguably number 1 MMA organization in our hearts of all time.
For sure. All right. We have a UFC fight night that we need to go over. If Tapology would like to be kind to me and actually come up. It is UFC Vegas 62. It is going to be headlined by Alexa Grasso versus Viviane Araújo. And I don't want to say it's a quiet weekend because it is still, a UFC fight night. It is a more quiet card. This is the calm before the storm. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, just a quick question before we jump into this card. Tom, what the hell are these UFC fight night naming conventions? Why in the world is it specifically called UFC Vegas? Why the hell is it the 62nd event of the series when we're at UFC Fight Night like 213 now? Or Why is it
Because
not?
because then from my understanding, I mean, it's like, I don't know what it is. It's like when the UFC moved over to ESPN, did the UFC Fight Night numbers switch up? Did we reset to 1 or?
I don't know. All I know is they took away the big number, the 200 plus number, once the ESPN deal started. At least from what I recall.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just think the naming convention's weird.
It is what it is. And we have Alexa Grasso taking on Viviane Araujo in the main event of the evening. Height advantage 1 inch to Grasso, reach advantage 2 inches to Araujo. The slight favorite is Grasso, who's won 4 of her last 5, has won 3 straight. And I believe she is, according to the world rankings on Tapology, Grasso is number 5, Araujo number 8. I will double check the UFC rankings to make sure that is a match or if it's a little different. I'm assuming it's going to be a little different on here.
So too, because you're looking at the whole women's landscape, including Bellator.
Correct. So this is actually a 5-6 matchup according to the UFC.
I think that's a little bit more realistic rankings wise. What do you think?
I agree.
I like Grasso to win, and I like the over 2.5 rounds prop.
I am going to agree. I'm going to go with Grasso. I think she's just overall a better fighter. I think this is a great opportunity for Araujo. I don't know if the winner of this will necessarily get a title shot off of their win. I still am
likely not, in my opinion, considering that Tyler Santos is still out there. She had a really controversial fight with Valentina, and Valentina still has other challengers that she can fight. Well, I guess I can back
and I think Dana is finally starting to warm up, realizing that Shevchenko and Nunes have nobody else in their league. Then he might one of these days finally give in and just make the trilogy fight happen.
Oh, I think he will eventually. I think it's going to get to the point where he doesn't have a choice. But I would like to see at some point Tyler Santos get a second crack at Valentina.
I agree.
How controversial her first fight was and how questionable that decision was, I might add.
I agree. Co-main event is going to be Jonathan Martinez taking on Cub Swanson.
I feel like this is the theme of our podcast tonight. Another up-and-coming fighter fighting an older veteran of the sport in a big spot.
Yeah, it's Cub Swanson, 10 years the elder of Jonathan Martinez. Martinez, like Grasso, straight 4 of the last 5. Swanson had a little bit of a mixed bag of late. Same height, about the same reach, half maybe for Swanson. And honestly, this is going to be a big moment for Jonathan Martinez. I'm going to go with Martinez in this one. I want to see how often Swanson really gets finished, because I want to say that he's too tough for Martinez to finish. I mean, he lost to Giga Chikaze. That's a grappling fight. Shane Burgos didn't finish him. Renato Moicano finished him by submission. Ortega. But I don't know if I'm ready to call Martinez on that same level as those guys we're naming yet. So I think Martinez will get the win, but I think it's only going to be a decision.
All right, yeah, I could see a decision in this fight as well. I think it'll either be a Martinez decision or a Swanson TKO. That's what I think. But I'm going to go with you here on this one as well and say that Martinez is going to beat Swanson just because Swanson's been way too inconsistent over the last 5-6 years and isn't the same guy that he once was, dating back to his WEC days. So
not at all.
I think Martinez is going to get it done.
And one more fight I do want to go over. I want to highlight because I think it is something that we need to talk. It is a pretty notable matchup. You know, hashtags. Well, we used to say hashtag save the flyweight. Askar Askarov versus Brandon Royval. I think this is going to be a really fun fight. I think this is going to be your fight of the night.
Yeah, I could see this being fight of the night. I have a question for you. Do you think the winner of this fight moves one step closer to a shot at gold.
Hell yes. I think there's a, let's see, Pantoja's 2, Francis 3. This is a 4-5 matchup, and
It's
France
a
had
gigantic fight.
gigantic. Oh yeah, absolutely. And France has just lost to Moreno when the interim fight happened, so there's a chance the winner of this fight could either get the next title shot or could be booked against Pantoja in a number 1 contenders fight.
Oh, I could easily see that. I like Askarov by TKO.
I am a big fan of the Raw Dog. I was advocating for him to get to the UFC before he was in the UFC, but I might go with you. I might go Askarov by late TKO.
Mm-hmm. I really like him in that spot. But yeah, just overall, I know grade for this card. This is a hardcore card. I give it a B plus. This is a solid card. There's some good. It's on your Stroganov versus Menefield, Martinez versus Davis. I'm gonna say there was that one card where there were all finishes. I think the majority of this card is going to be finishes. I really do.
Think about this. Rafael Sunsao is going to be on the okay, it's the featured prelim. I'm like, wait a minute. Rafael Sunsao on the prelims, but then I saw a featured prelim. I'm like, all right. Oh, I forgot about this. Mike Jackson's on this card.
Hilarious.
I completely forgot.
The once prominent fighter who beat CM Punk and is currently or was at one time an MMA journalist.
Yeah. And he's taking on Pete Rodriguez.
The one bet that I really like is Maximov money line over Malkoon. I like that a lot.
Which one? Oh, this
Maximov money line against Malkoon.
High on Maximov, are you?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I would say do a Grasso Arujo go to distance prop. I'm on that one. I wish you could have a proper fight of the night because I see
that would be a glorious addition to the DraftKings options of many, if you will.
Because if there was an actual fight of the night option, I would say put a bet on Askarov versus Royval as your fight of the night. What do you think about this one? This is an interesting one, Zan. Misha Serkinov and Alonzo Menefield.
Yeah, this one I like. This one I like a don't go the distance prop on this.
I'll do that. So my best bets would be Grasso Arujo goes the distance. Serkinov Menefield doesn't go the distance. And maybe an Askarov line or you know what? If you want to just, have some shits and giggles, take the Askarov line off and replace it with a Pete Rodriguez money line win over Mike Jackson.
Yeah, that's solid. So my best bets are Nick Maximov money line, Alexa Grasso to win by decision over Arujo, and I'm gonna this one we haven't said yet. I like CJ Vergara to get the job done
over Tatsuya Taira.
I do. Yep.
Interesting. All right, we got an interesting card in our hands. Some interesting bet ideas. So those of you who are, big time gamblers, make sure to number one, gamble responsibly. Number two, hopefully some of our advice wins you some dollars in this one. Hopefully you come away with.
Or if you really don't like our podcast, you can always fade our picks too.
Hopefully one way or another we end up giving you some for this card. All right, but that's gonna do it. But that's going to do it for this edition of the MMA Outsiders. Make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. Ring the notification bell so you get notified for everything here on the Empty the Bench Network. Follow me at Thomas J. Albano and Tom Talk Sports 9 on Twitter. Follow Zan at ZanBando99 on Twitter. Make sure to follow us across social media at MMA Outsiders ETB and follow the network at ETB Network. Until next week for episode 11, that's Zan Bando. I'm Tom Albano. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.
And be Joe Pfeiffer.
Be Joe Pfeiffer.